The CEO's daughter fired me publicly with a hoodie and a fake smile, erasing 10 years of my work in seconds. She thought she'd won, but she didn't read the contract. So I triggered a hidden clause that turned their $30 million empire into worthless code. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. Enjoy the company hoodie and the gift card, she said. Her voice was all nasal and smug, the kind of tone that sounded like her Botox hadn't quite settled right and was slowly choking out her capacity for basic human empathy. That was the exact moment I knew it was happening. I was standing in the center of the open plan office, under the glare of the fluorescent track lighting that I had personally ordered 3 years ago during the renovation. But now, the lights felt like interrogation lamps. Kenzie, the 26-year-old chief culture officer, and more importantly, the CEO's daughter, was firing me. And she wasn't doing it in a private office with a folder of paperwork and a box of tissues. She was firing me in front of the whole damn company. There was no warning. There was no "can we chat in private?" Slack message. There was no formal write-up in my personnel file. It was just a bright, loud, terrifying performance art piece during our quarterly all-hands meeting. It was slotted right between the announcements about the new combative flavors in the breakroom vending machine and the Q3 burn rate analysis. I stood there, my hands folded calmly in front of me, though my knuckles were white. I watched her pretend to read from a script on her iPad that she definitely didn't write. "Samantha has been a valued member of the Viron family," she cooed, tilting her head to the side like a golden retriever that had just learned a new trick. She wasn't looking at me. She was performing for the 46 other employees sitting in rows of folding chairs. But due to performance misalignment and shifting culture priorities, we've decided to part ways. She reached into one of the stupid culture crates we usually reserved for new interns, cardboard boxes filled with branded junk, and pulled out a hoodie. It was navy blue, cheap polyester, with the Viron logo screen-printed crookedly across the chest. "We want to send you off with love," she said, thrusting the garment toward me. I looked at it. My name was scrawled on the tag in Sharpie, smeared slightly, like I was a lost and found item that had been unclaimed for too long. Tucked inside the pouch pocket was a plastic card. "And a $50 gift card to the juice bar," she added brightly, as if she had suddenly remembered a line. "Oh, and unfortunately, your Q4 bonus didn't meet the updated KPI rubric, so it won't be awarded." Updated KPI rubric? I blinked, fighting the urge to laugh hysterically. "Lady, I wrote the original KPI rubric. I built the algorithm that tracked it." I could feel 46 heads swivel in slow motion toward me. It was a physical weight, that collective gaze. I saw the sales guys awkwardly tugging at their collars, suddenly finding the carpet patterns fascinating. The intern in the front row was frantically pretending to check her phone, her thumbs hovering over a screen that was likely dark. The only person who didn't flinch was our CFO, a man I had saved from 3 separate audits, whose expression currently read, "Don't drag me into this, Sam. I already bought a boat." So I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was that same calm, "Don't worry, I won't sue you yet" smile that HR people fear deep in their crunchy, granola souls. I reached out and took the hoodie like it was radioactive waste. I held it up, feeling its weird, scratchy texture, the texture of cheap judgment. "Thanks for the memories," I said. My voice was steady, even friendly. It wasn't steady because I wasn't furious. I was incandescent with rage. My blood was boiling so hot I could hear the rush of it in my ears, drowning out the hum of the server room down the hall, the server room I built. But fury is for amateurs, and I am a professional. Kenzie beamed, mistaking my composure for submission. She actually clapped her hands together once, a sharp smack that echoed in the silent room. "Great! Let's give Samantha a round of applause for her journey." 3 people clapped. It was a pathetic, scattering sound, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. I didn't look at them. I just turned my heel, clutching the polyester insult to my chest, and walked toward the door. The betrayal wasn't just in the firing, it was in the theater of it. It was the public execution disguised as a celebration. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a declaration of war. I walked out without slamming a door. That was the most important part of the exit. They wanted a meltdown. I knew Kenzie was waiting for it, her phone probably ready to record the crazy older woman losing her cool so she could pass the video around Slack like a meme. She wanted a story to tell at brunch about how toxic the legacy employees were. I gave them nothing. Just the quiet, rhythmic click-clack of my heels on the polished concrete floor and the faint, sickly sweet smell of vanilla air freshener trying to cover up the rot of the building. Here is what no one noticed in the chaos of that meeting. HR didn't have me sign anything. There was no exit packet waiting on a desk. No NDA reminder slid across a table. No, you acknowledge your termination was fair and legal document. Just a cheery, pre-written email that pinged my phone as I reached the lobby, saying my access would be deactivated by 3:00 p.m. and wishing me good luck in future endeavors. That was their first mistake. Actually, it was their second. The first was thinking I was just an employee. I walked straight past the glass-walled offices where the executives, men I had known for a decade, pretended to be deeply engrossed in their monitors. I walked past the break room where someone was already slicing a celebratory cake for another successful quarter, the knife sinking into the frosting with a soft squelch. I walked past the front desk, where the office manager, a sweet girl named Jessica, offered me a pity smile that looked like she was looking at someone with terminal flatulence. "Take care, Sam," she whispered, looking around to make sure Kenzie wasn't watching. "You too, Jess," I said, my voice eerily calm. Outside, the sky was a cheerful mockery, blue, breezy, completely indifferent to the fact that my career had just been decapitated. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the reserved spots for the C-suite Teslas. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door. The silence was instant. The air inside the car was still and warm. I sat there for a moment, staring at the hoodie in my lap. I ran my thumb over the screen-printed logo. It peeled slightly at the edge. Cheap. Everything about this new era of the company was cheap. Then the shaking started. It began in my hands, a subtle tremor that rattled the plastic gift card against the console. Then it moved to my knees. A wave of nausea rolled over me, hot and suffocating. I gripped the steering wheel, squeezing until my knuckles ached, forcing myself to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. They had erased me. 10 years. I was employee number 4. I had wired the first server rack myself. I had written the original operations manual on a napkin at a diner with the CEO, Robert. And now I was being discarded for a culture shift. But then the shaking stopped. It was replaced by something cold and hard, settling in the pit of my stomach like a stone. I popped the trunk, got out, and tossed the hoodie inside next to my emergency kit. Then, I reached deeper into the trunk and pulled out my personal laptop. Not the company-issued Dell that was probably already locking me out, but my own MacBook. The one I never logged into from the company Wi-Fi. The one with a very specific file stored on a very specific encrypted partition. I sat back in the driver's seat and booted it up. The screen glowed to life, reflecting in my sunglasses. I navigated through 3 layers of folders, typed in a complex password, and opened a directory labeled Project Insurance. Inside was a single file, Clause 12, 7B Trigger, PDF. Kenzie may have fired me. She may have humiliated me. She may have cut my bonus and given me a juice card to a place that doesn't even exist in my zip code. But as I looked at the file name, a small, dark smile touched my lips. She had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just the head of operations. I was the architect. And you never fire the architect without checking the blueprints for traps. To understand why the file on my screen was a nuclear weapon, you have to understand who I was to Viron and who Kenzie was pretending to be. I didn't just work there, I was the infrastructure. 3 weeks before the hoodie hit the fan, I had been sitting in a booth at a dive bar that smelled like old fries and cheaper secrets. Across from me was Shelley, my attorney. Not a corporate yes man, but a real lawyer, 42, cynical as hell, wearing pearls like they were brass knuckles. "You sure you want to do this, Sam?" she had asked, whistling through her teeth as she read the document I drafted. "They've been treating me like an employee, but I've been acting like an owner," I told her, sipping a glass of Pinot that was balancing dangerously close to the edge of the table. "It's time I got some insurance." See, while everyone else at the company had been focused on flashy UX updates and the new sales funnel integrations, I had spent the last 6 months cleaning up our back-end spaghetti code. I rebuilt the company's operational spine. The problem was that spine wasn't proprietary to Viron. We'd been Frankensteining together third-party tools for years, patching them like the tech version of duct tape. So I built a new one, clean, secure, scalable. And I did it through my own LLC, which had technically been on our vendor ledger for years, listed quietly under Ops Architecture and Platform Integration. No one noticed when the invoice changed slightly. No one blinked when I submitted a statement of work that rooted licensing rights to my LLC, not the company. And no one, especially not Kenzie, read the legalese about the revocation of rights upon the improper dismissal of key personnel. It passed through legal like a lukewarm breeze, rubber-stamped, filed, forgotten. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. If the company terminated me without formal review and documented cause, the perpetual license would self-revoke instantaneously. No lawsuit, no messy arbitration, just lights out. Kenzie never suspected a thing. How could she? She was too busy optimizing culture with wellness initiatives and Slack emojis. Kenzie Sterling floated into Viron 6 months ago like she'd been airlifted from a lifestyle influencer's Pinterest board. She had a designer tote, daily affirmations, and the unearned confidence of someone who had never had a performance review in her entire life. She had no resume, no track record, just a press release announcing her as Chief Culture Officer, a role that apparently came with all the authority of a VP and none of the accountability. She was Nepo baby royalty, cloaked in pastel blazers and buzzwords. She took over the second floor, replacing the developers' quiet zones with scented candles and framed quotes about radical alignment. Then, she took aim at me. It started with the little things. My monthly ops reports would be accidentally left off meeting agendas. My name was removed from key Slack threads. Budget approvals for critical server maintenance were routed to new culture committees that somehow all included her friends from yoga class. I'd walk into a strategy session and find my seat missing. Literally, someone had wheeled my ergonomic chair out into the hallway. Kenzie didn't attack directly. That would have required a spine. No, her weapons were passive aggression and vague jargon, two things she wielded like a toddler with a glitter glue stick. If I raised a concern about data security in a meeting, she'd sigh, look at the other executives, and say, "Let's reframe that energy, guys. I think Samantha's perspective is rooted in a scarcity mindset." Scarcity mindset? I was trying to keep the damn company solvent while she was billing a $900 team connection ceremony that was just a drum circle in the break room. The vendetta was clear. I made her insecure. My competence was a mirror she couldn't crack. Every time I calmly pointed out a flaw in her latest initiative, like the employee empowerment stipend, that was just a Venmo transfer to her college roommate for motivational stickers, she'd get this tight, pained smile. She'd nod like I was a confused elderly relative and say, "Samantha brings an important legacy lens to things." Legacy lens, like I was a fax machine that somehow still functioned. She hated that I had influence. She hated that I had history. And mostly, she despised that people trusted me more than they trusted her father, the CEO. But her biggest mistake wasn't the insults, it was the greed. I knew she was moving money. I'd seen the transfers. Wellness experiences that mapped mysteriously to her Palm Springs bachelorette party. Consulting fees paid to DJs. She was hollowing out the company from the inside, and I was the only one with the flashlight. So she fired me. She thought if she got rid of the watchdog, she could steal the whole house. I looked down at my laptop screen in the car. The Clause 12.7b file was open. It was a digital kill switch, and my finger was hovering right over the trigger. I didn't drive home immediately. Instead, I drove to the one place where I could think without the ghost of my career haunting the room, the marina. Not because I owned a boat. Robert, the CEO, owned a 70-foot yacht named the Legacy, which was ironic since he was currently busy torching his, but because the Wi-Fi at the coffee shop near the docks was unencrypted and fast. I ordered a black coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the file. Clause 12, 7B trigger, PDF. This wasn't just a document, it was a dead man's switch. Years ago, when the company was just me, Robert, and a server rack in a garage, I realized that Robert was a visionary, but he was also malleable. He listened to whoever shouted the loudest. Back then, it was me. But I knew that eventually, as the company grew, the voices would multiply. I needed to protect my work. So I didn't just build Viron's back. End Systems as an employee. I built them through my personal LLC, Ray's Integrated Systems, and licensed them back to the company. It was a standard arrangement for early-stage startups to minimize payroll tax liabilities. Robert loved it because it saved him cash flow in 2018. I loved it because it meant I technically owned the intellectual property of the operational spine of the company. The contract was clear. Viron had a perpetual, royalty-free license to use the software so long as Samantha Ray was employed as the key administrator. If I was terminated without gross misconduct, proven by a third-party auditor, the license revoked itself immediately. They hadn't just fired an employee, they had pirated their own platform. But clicking execute on the clause wasn't enough. That would shut them down, sure, but Kenzie would spin it. She'd detail the board I was a hacker, a saboteur, a disgruntled ex-employee destroying company property. She would play the victim, and Robert, my oldest friend and greatest disappointment, would believe her because she was his blood. I needed more. I needed to prove why she fired me. I tethered my phone and logged into a secure, mirror backup of the company's financial logs. I had set this up 6 months ago, not to spy, but because the numbers hadn't been adding up. Kenzie's culture budget was opaque, a black hole where profitability went to die. I started digging. I pulled the raw disbursement logs for Q3 and Q4. "Come on, Kenzie," I whispered to the screen. "Show me where you buried the bodies." It didn't take long. Kenzie wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a greedy amateur who thought miscellaneous was a magic cloak of invisibility. I cross-referenced the payroll rubric she had mentioned, the one that allegedly denied me my bonus. Then I looked at the bonus pool allocation. The money was there. It had been approved by finance 3 weeks ago, but 4 days before the all-hands meeting, the funds had been diverted. I followed the transaction ID. $18,750 transferred to a vendor labeled Holistic Team Dynamics. I ran a search on the vendor. No website, no LinkedIn, just a registered business address in Palm Springs. I pulled up Google Maps. The address wasn't an office. It was a luxury Airbnb villa known for hosting bachelorette parties. I checked the dates. The transfer happened the exact weekend Kenzie had posted 26 Instagram stories from her bestie's final fling in Palm Springs. I kept digging. $4,200 to an emotional environment consultant. I ran the tax ID. It belonged to a DJ named Spin Cycle who played at Coachella. $12,000 for nutritional alignment supplements. That one routed to a shell company owned by her boyfriend. She hadn't fired me because of negativity. She hadn't fired me because of shifting culture priorities. She had fired me because I was the only person in the company who knew how to read the raw database logs. I was the only one who would have noticed that she was funding her lifestyle by skimming the top off the operations budget. She needed my salary off the books to cover the holes she was digging in the ledger. And she needed my access revoked before the Q4 audit. I sat back, the cold coffee forgotten. I wasn't just holding the kill switch for the software anymore. I was holding the evidence of felony embezzlement. I picked up my phone and dialed Shelley. "Tell me you didn't sign anything," Shelley said before she even said hello. "I didn't sign a napkin," I replied. "And Shell, I'm activating clause 12.7b. "Nuclear option," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "You know once you pull that lever, there's no going back. It's scorched earth." "They scorched the earth first, Shelley. I'm just taking my seeds back." I paused. "And I'm sending you a file. Subject line, Kenzie's retirement fund. You might want to look at the wire transfers." "Send it," she said. "I'll draft the letters. But Sam, be careful. Robert isn't going to see this as justice. He's going to see it as an attack on his little girl." Robert ceased to be my concern the moment he let his little girl hand me a hoodie instead of a severance check, I said, and hung up. The next morning, I did exactly what they asked. I disappeared. Ghosting a company isn't like ghosting a bad date. With a date, you block a number. With a company, you remove your fingerprints from the glass and let their own greasy mess come into focus. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't post a fake optimistic on to the next chapter. Goodbye with emojis and a Starbucks selfie. I didn't rage post. I just vanished. And let me tell you, nothing unnerves a toxic workplace more than silence. I set up a command center in my dining room. 3 monitors, a fresh pot of coffee, and a live feed of the public-facing status page of Viron's platform. Phase 1 of the fallout was subtle. It started at 9:00 a.m. on Tuesday. I saw the ticket volume spike on the public support. Twitter handle, users were complaining about login timeouts. At Viron support, why can't I access my dashboard? Getting a 403 error. At Viron support, is the site down? My inventory isn't loading. The automated vendor flow system, the one I built through my LLC, had a heartbeat check. Every 24 hours, it pinged the master server for a valid license key. If it didn't find one, it didn't shut down hard. That would be too obvious. Instead, it started throttling bandwidth. It initiated legacy degradation. Kenzie, of course, went on a communication offensive. I watched from home as she posted a video to the company's internal blog, which she foolishly also shared on her public Instagram story. She was wearing the hoodie. "Happy Tuesday, Viron family," she chirped, holding a matcha latte. "We're experiencing some minor growth recalibrations today. It's just the system shedding its old skin to make way for the new high-vibe infrastructure. Don't let the tech jitters lower your frequency." "Growth recalibrations," I muttered, sipping my coffee. "That's a new word for the server is rejecting your requests because you don't own it." By Wednesday, the jitters were tremors. The finance team sent a corrected revenue projection that was off by $1.3 million. They tried to blame QuickBooks API delays, but the truth was simpler. They never learned the 2-step audit process I'd built because I didn't give them the playbook. You don't hand blueprints to people building your guillotine. Then I made my first move. I didn't contact Kenzie. I didn't contact Robert. I had Shelley send a formal inquiry to the board of directors, specifically targeting the audit committee. The email was simple. It didn't mention the software license yet. It was titled, "Discrepancies regarding vendor allocation 88,392, Holistic Team Dynamics." It attached the raw log of the $18,750 transfer and the screenshot of Kenzie's bachelorette party itinerary, which she had helpfully posted online with the hashtag VironLife. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Kenzie. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "Sam, we need to talk. There's a misunderstanding with some files you took. Legal is looking into data theft. Call me immediately so we can fix this without getting the police involved." I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. Data theft. She was accusing me of stealing the evidence of her stealing. It was the desperate, flailing swing of a bully who had never been hit back. Then a second text came through. This one was from Robert. "Samantha, please pick up. Kenzie is upset. She says you're trying to sabotage the monolith pitch. We've been friends for 20 years. Don't do this." I stared at the screen, feeling a crack in my resolve. Robert and I had started this company in a garage. I had held his hand when his wife passed away. I had been there when Kenzie graduated high school. The guilt was a physical pang in my chest. But then I looked at the hoodie sitting in the corner of the room, still inside out. I remembered the look on Robert's face during the meeting, the way he had studied his shoes while his daughter humiliated me. He hadn't protected me. He hadn't even looked at me. He had chosen the path of least resistance, sacrificing my livelihood to keep peace at his dinner table. He wasn't my friend anymore. He was just the CEO of a company that was currently operating unlicensed software. I typed a reply to Robert. "I'm not sabotaging anything, Robert. I'm just enforcing the contract you signed. Ask Kenzie about the Palm Springs invoices. And tell her the data theft she's worried about is actually just an audit log." I hit send. 10 minutes later, Kenzie posted a frantic message on the company's Slack, which I could still read because I had built the backdoor admin account she didn't know existed. At Channel Urgent, ignore any rumors regarding budget allocation. We are dealing with a security breach from a disgruntled former contractor. Please change your passwords immediately. She was doubling down. She was painting me as the villain. She was lying to the staff, lying to her father, and lying to herself. "Okay," I said, turning back to my monitors. "You want a security breach? Let's talk about security." I opened the terminal on my center monitor. The Clause 12.7b protocol was currently in Stage 1, throttling. It was time to initiate Stage 2, revocation. By Thursday, the atmosphere inside Viron, based on the panic I could see in the system logs, was catastrophic. Monolith Capital, the venture firm poised to invest $50 million in the Series B round, had begun their final due diligence. This was the big leagues. These weren't angel investors who wrote checks based on vibes and slide decks. These were forensic accountants in expensive suits. And suddenly, every spreadsheet, every process map, every vendor agreement I'd ever touch. Ed was under a magnifying glass. Except now, there was no me. There was no ops whisperer to explain why vendor 6A has a 72-hour lead time unless you bribe the scheduler with Girl Scout cookies. There was no one to decode the maze of invoice routing I'd built to prevent fraud and, ironically, to contain Kenzie. Kenzie was blocking the monolith analysts. I heard from a friend in sales that she had physically barred them from the server room, claiming it was a clean energy zen zone that couldn't be disturbed. The monolith analysts weren't idiots. They started highlighting things, literally yellow highlighter on every missing process doc, every incomplete integration. Then came the call I was waiting for. It was Thursday afternoon. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, Bay area code. "This is Samantha," I answered, my voice cool. "Hi, is this Samantha Ray?" The voice was male, stressed, and trying very hard to sound casual. "This is Alan Brewster, outside counsel for Viron." I knew Alan. He was a decent lawyer, but he was overworked and terrified of Robert. "Hello, Alan." "I was hoping to. Well, informally ask if you might be open to consulting on a few time-sensitive vendor matters," he stammered. "Nothing official, of course, just some light guidance. We're in final pitch prep and certain items you previously managed have gaps." "Gaps," I repeated. "That's a cute word for it." "Look, Sam," he dropped the pretense. The backend is rejecting the admin keys. The inventory system is throwing errors I've never seen. Kenzie says you changed the passwords before you left, but it can't find a breach. We just need to know how to stabilize the environment for the pitch on Monday. Robert is willing to offer a consulting fee. $5,000 for the weekend. $5,000. They had fired me, stolen my bonus, humiliated me, and now they wanted to buy my dignity back for the price of a used Honda. Alan, I said, did you review my termination documents? I wasn't involved in the termination. That was handled by internal HR. Exactly, I said. If you had been involved, you would have read the vendor contracts. Specifically, the agreement between Viron Inc. and Ray's Integrated Systems LLC. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. He was searching for it. Ray's Integrated. Wait, that's a vendor? I thought that was just the name of the legacy database. It's the owner of the legacy database, Alan, and the license to use that database is contingent on my employment. The typing stopped. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Clause 12.7b, I said softly. Reversion of use license upon improper termination. Oh my God, he whispered. The system isn't broken, Alan. It's working exactly as designed. It's rejecting your keys because you don't have a license anymore. You are operating illegal software. Sam, you can't. This is the Series B if the investors find out we don't own the stack. Then maybe you shouldn't have let the culture officer fire the chief architect with a hoodie and a grudge. I cut him off. I'm not fixing it, Alan. I'm not consulting. And if Kenzie tries to touch that code to bypass the lock, she'll be violating federal IP laws. I suggest you tell Robert. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I turned to my desk. I had one final document to send. The email and the phone call were just warnings. This was the nail in the coffin. I pulled the manila folder from my file cabinet. Inside was the physical copy of the notification. Formal notification of clause activation, 12.7b. To the Board of Directors of Viron, Inc. Due to the termination of Samantha Ray without cause, review, or formal documentation, this letter serves as official notice that exclusive licensing rights to the following tools, platforms, and backend integrations have been revoked. I attached the forensic report of Kenzie's embezzlement as Exhibit A regarding the lack of cause for my firing, proving it was a cover-up for fraud. I called a courier service. I have a package for same-day delivery, I told the dispatcher. It needs to go to the boardroom of Viron Inc., and it needs to be signed for by Robert Sterling personally. The pitch was tomorrow. Kenzie was going to stand up there and try to sell a vision of the future. I was going to make sure that when she clicked, next slide, the floor dropped out. I printed the label, stuck it to the envelope, and watched the courier drive away. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the truth. And the truth was a cold, hard piece of paper making its way toward a glass table where a father was about to learn exactly who his daughter really was. The boardroom was all glass and hubris, perched 27 stories up with a panoramic view of the bay that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a decade. It was one of those aggressively modern spaces. A long, polished mahogany table that looked like it belonged in a Bond villain's lair, surrounded by ergonomic chairs that cost $2,000 a pop, but never actually felt comfortable. It was Viron's big day, the Series B pitch with Monolith Capital. This was the meeting that was supposed to catapult the company from a scrappy disruptor to a market leader. $50 million was on the table. And Kenzie was dressed for the coronation. She wore a cream blazer that was tailored within an inch of its life, designer heels that clicked sharply on the tile, and she had set an oversized water bottle on the table with motivational timestamps on the side like "Crush it" and "You're basically opera." Her PowerPoint presentation, projected onto the massive 8K screen, was full of animations. Animations. I sat in the back row. Gregory Watts, the lead partner from Monolith, had insisted on technical continuity in the room, and the board, too flustered to think long-term, had agreed to invite me as a silent observer. Kenzie hadn't been told until she walked in. Based on the way her face had drained of color when she saw me sitting by the ficus plant, I think her soul tried to exit through her pores. But she was powering through, pretending I was just part of the furniture. "Thank you all for joining us," she purred, tapping her clicker like she was hosting a TED Talk on startup nepotism. "At Viron, we don't just build platforms, we architect trust." That line actually made one of the Monolith associates raise an eyebrow. In the world of venture capital, hearing a 26-year-old with a marketing degree talk about architecting trust is usually the signal to check your wallet. The presentation rolled on. It was a masterclass in emptiness. Slides flew by with graphs that had no y-axis labels, pie charts of projected emotional throughput, and buzzwords stacked like a Jenga tower. Scalable empathy, culture-forward architecture, radical alignment. There was no mention of product stability. No mention of the back-end stack. No mention of the operational chaos boiling under the hood, or the fact that the inventory system had been throttling bandwidth for 48 hours. Kenzie clicked to a slide titled "The Next Chapter." "We've positioned ourselves to triple our annual recurring revenue in the next 18 months through strategic partnerships and proprietary system leverage," she said, her voice swelling with rehearsed passion. That's when Gregory Watts slowly opened his diligence folder. He didn't slam it, he didn't cough. He just opened it with the quiet precision of a coroner preparing to work. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Gregory said. His voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. "But before we get to the revenue projections, can we clarify something regarding the proprietary system leverage?" Kenzie froze mid-gesture. Her smile twitched, threatening to slide off her face. "Of course, Gregory, we value transparency above all." "Good," Gregory said. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is a termination memo, dated last week." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning and the faint buzz of a fly hitting the glass window. "This document," Gregory continued, tapping the page with a manicured finger, "states that Samantha Ray, your head of operations and systems architect, was terminated for negativity and misalignment with culture." Kenzie nodded solemnly, adopting a look of pained leadership. "Yes, correct, we had philosophical differences. It was a leadership call to protect the team's energy." Gregory didn't react. He didn't look at her energy. He turned to the next page. "And was this termination reviewed by internal counsel?" Kenzie's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at her father, Robert, who was sitting at the head of the table. Robert shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on his water glass as if he were trying to telekinetically make it explode. "The HR department handled the process," Kenzie stammered. "It was a standard separation." "I see," Gregory said. He picked up another document. This one was on thick, weighted stock. "Then can you explain this?" He held up the letter I had couriered over. The header read, "Ray's Integrated Systems, LLC, formal notification of clause activation." "This is a notification from the IP holder of your backend infrastructure," Gregory read. Clause 12.7b states that the exclusive software license for the Viron platform is contingent upon the continued employment of the key administrator, Samantha Ray, and is subject to immediate revocation if said administrator is terminated without cause or formal legal review. Kenzie's knuckles went white on the table edge. She stared at the paper as if it were written in alien hieroglyphics. "That clause," she whispered, that's just legal jargon. It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," Gregory corrected her, his voice devoid of pity. "It means that when you fired Miss Ray without cause and without checking your own vendor contracts, you didn't just fire an employee. You terminated the license to your entire core infrastructure." The general counsel, a man named Marcus who had been eerily silent in the corner, stood up so fast his chair wheeled back and hit the glass wall with a loud thud. His face had gone sheet white. "Let me see that," Marcus demanded, his voice cracking. He practically ran to the table and snatched the document from Gregory's hand. He scanned it, his eyes darting back and forth, desperate to find a loophole. "Where?" Marcus wheezed. "How did this get signed?" "I drafted it myself," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. Every head turned toward the back row. I didn't stand up. I just sat there, legs crossed, hands resting on my knee, looking at them with the same calm I'd had when I accepted the hoodie. "Your department signed off on it during the vendor consolidation last year," I continued, meeting Marcus's terrified gaze. "I believe it came through during the crosswalk audit phase. You were very focused on the indemnity caps, Marcus. You didn't pay much attention to the licensing reversion." Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. He looked at Robert. I missed this. It was buried in the technical exhibits." Gregory took the paper back, smoothing it out on the table. "Buried or not, it is enforceable. And according to this, as of 48 hours ago, Viron Inc. no longer has the legal right to operate the software you are currently pitching to us." He pointed at the screen, where Kenzie's slide still glowed with promises of future millions. "This roadmap assumes platform stability," Gregory said. "It assumes you own the engine. But you don't. You are driving a stolen car." "We can fix this," Kenzie blurted out, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. She looked wildly around the room. "It's just a technicality. We'll build a new backend, or we'll hire someone to unlock it." "You can't unlock it, Kenzie," I said, finally standing up. "It's AES 256 encrypted. The keys are on a drive in Iceland. And if you try to crack it, you'll be violating federal IP laws during a securities offering. That's not a technicality. That's prison time." The silence that followed was heavy, choking, and absolute. The CTO, a quiet man who had spent the last 10 minutes praying to the ceiling, finally buried his face in his hands. The VP of sales walked to the window and stared out, looking like he was calculating the distance to the ground. And Robert just slumped. The CEO, the man who had built this company with me in a garage, looked like gravity had finally remembered to crush him. He looked at his daughter, then at the investors, and finally, for the first time in weeks, at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a hollow, terrifying realization of what he had allowed to happen. Gregory stood up. He closed his folder. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Congratulations," he said, looking at the board members. "You just lost your company." "Wait," Kenzie cried, reaching out as if she could physically grab the $50 million floating away. "Gregory, please, this was a culture call. She was toxic. You can't let one disgruntled employee ruin a legacy." "I hope the hoodie was worth it," Gregory said. He didn't even look at her. He turned, walked past the stunned board members, and stopped in front of me. He didn't smile, but he gave me a curt, respectful nod. Then he walked out the door, leaving $30 million of vaporware and a room full of people holding the bag. The chaos didn't start immediately. For 10 seconds after the door closed, the boardroom remained in a state of suspended animation, frozen by the sheer magnitude of the disaster. Then the yelling started. Why the hell didn't anyone flag this? One of the board members shouted, slamming a pen onto the glass table. "She warned us," the VP of Growth whispered, looking at Kenzie with pure venom. "I remember the email. She told us the vendor contracts were complex. You said she was hoarding knowledge." "I didn't know," Kenzie shrieked, her voice cracking. "How was I supposed to know she owned the code? That's not fair. Daddy, tell them it's not fair." She turned to Robert, looking for the safety net that had always been there. But Robert wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the blank screen where the projector had finally gone to sleep. His face was gray, sweat beading on his forehead. He clutched his chest, wheezing slightly. "Get out," Robert whispered. "What?" Kenzie blinked, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, not the crocodile ones she used for engagement. "I said get out," Robert roared, slamming his fist on the table with enough force. "See to spill the crush it water bottle. You fired the only person who actually worked here. You and your candles and your damn vibe checks. You destroyed it all." Kenzie recoiled as if slapped. She looked around the room for an ally, but there were none. The board members were already on their phones, calling their own lawyers, distancing themselves from the blast zone. I didn't stay for the rest of the fight. I didn't need to. The show was over and the reviews were in. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. As I passed the catering table, I saw something bundled on a chair, a spare culture crate that Kenzie had brought for the investors. Inside was one of those navy blue hoodies. I paused. I reached out, picked up the hoodie, and looked at the logo one last time. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I dropped it into the trash can next to the door. Thunk. I walked out into the hallway. It was cold, bright, and incredibly peaceful. The elevator ride down was silent. When the doors opened to the lobby, the receptionist, Jessica, looked up. She saw my face, calm, unbothered, maybe even a little lighter, and she smiled. She didn't ask what happened. She just gave me a thumbs up. I walked out the front doors and into the sunlight. The air smelled of the ocean and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like victory. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't Kenzie. It wasn't Robert. It was an email notification. From Gregory Watts, Monolith Capital, subject: Acquisition discussion. Samantha. Impressive documentation. Monolith is no longer interested in investing in Viron Inc., as their valuation is effectively zero without the IP. However, we are very interested in the architecture of Ray's integrated systems. If the platform is as scalable as the due diligence suggests, we'd like to discuss acquiring the license directly from your LLC and deploying it to our other portfolio companies. Let's talk terms. You hold all the cards. Ajay. I stared at the screen. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, a real one, deep and resonant. I walked to my car, the same sensible sedan I had driven away in just a week ago. I tossed my bag in the passenger seat and sat there for a moment, listening to the city. I thought about Robert, alone in that boardroom, realizing that his legacy had been eaten by the very nepotism he had fostered. I thought about Kenzie, who would probably spin this as a learning journey on LinkedIn in a few months, but who would never again be trusted with a budget larger than a lemonade stand. And then I thought about my bread dough rising in the kitchen at home. It needed to be punched down and baked. I started the car. They had tried to erase me with a $50 gift card and a fake smile. They thought I was just a line item, a cost to be cut, a legacy to be discarded. But they forgot the most important rule of construction. You don't tear down the person who holds the blueprints unless you're ready for the roof to cave in. I put the car in drive and pulled out into traffic. I wasn't Samantha the employee anymore. I was Samantha the owner, and business was good.